Thanksgiving, everybody, from Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Hope everyone is going to have a great holiday. Spend it with friends and family, especially the family. It's a really important time of year to get together and have some fun. Watch some football today. Enjoy that. If you're in Cleveland and you're kind of sad about that Cleveland Cavalier loss last night, you're not alone. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But like, subscribe, and comment below as always. And always check out the show on social media. You can find me at Hoty Raw Takes on Instagram. You can find me at Hoty Andrew on Twitter/X, or find me on Facebook, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Welcome to the show, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic week. And we'll have Short Take Saturday, of course, this Saturday. Now, before we get to the nitty-gritty football and to some Cavs, and of course, that almighty game of all games between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Michigan Wolverines, I wanted to throw out, I had a lot of comments on one of my reels recently, so I want to give out some shout-outs here. Blank_prods commented on the reel where I talked about when was the last Steeler diva wide receiver, or the last Steeler wide receiver that wasn't a diva, I should say. Blank_prods saying George Pickens is the most calm, respectful, and most polite person I think I've ever seen. He ended up telling me he was a Packer fan, so I wanted to thank him for the comment. Another one, a good response here. This is Jeitler. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jeitler1045, Ryan Switzer. And I actually said that might not necessarily be a bad pick, so I gave him that one. James Curran, and I want to be as non-biased as possible. I get I'm in Cleveland and hate the Steelers, but I also want to admit a few things here too. James Curran 9002. As I said, I hope I'm pronouncing everybody's name right. So you've got a list of divas at quarterback for the Browns: Johnny Manziel, Watkins, Mayfield, and Kosar. And outside of Bernie Kosar, I guess I kind of agree with that list. In terms of Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield has kind of shown not to be a diva now, but another answer. Let's take a look here. Another comment here, Mark the Fire God. Does Mike Wallace count? Because I don't remember him being a diva. I said I'll count that one, so we'll give it that one as well. And we had another one from David the Bowler, a great follower of the show. Shout out to him, of course. When was Steve Smith there? And, I clarified that he played for the Ravens, and he was in a Ravens mood. That's totally fine. I just want to throw it out there, because thank you for commenting on the video. He realized that, but at the same time, he's been very supportive of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty, so I want to give him a shout-out. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody who commented. As I said, you could agree with me, you could disagree with me, I don't care. You comment, you give your Raw Takes just as I give my Raw Takes. That's what I want this show to be about. So I'm all for you, and thank you very much for commenting on that reel, and we're going to try to keep up those comments. Make sure to comment on the video below, and happy Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for all the comments that took place on that reel. But now let's get to some Raw Takes with me, Andrew Hoty. So we have 3 football games today in the NFL. The Detroit Lions and Chicago Bears, an NFC North showdown, will kick things off at 1 o'clock later today. You may already be watching, or the game may be over as you're watching, because I know it is Thanksgiving morning as I record this. For me, I think the Detroit Lions should easily win this game on paper, but the Bears are a feisty team. They are kind of fun to watch, but I just think culturally they're in the gutter. I think Matt Eberflus, the writing's on the wall. He has to go. I think Caleb Williams has shown some stuff, but I'm still not sold on his attitude. I think he's just kind of a jerk. I've watched some of his press conferences. I still don't like Caleb Williams' attitude, and it's hard for me to warm up to a guy like that. I still think if you are the Chicago Bears, now you're at a point you might have should have taken Jaden Daniels, but maybe you should have taken Bo Nix as well. So for me, I'm just not sold on Chicago as a whole. Their defense is pretty tough. They've always had a good culture defensively, though. But you look at the NFC North, the Bears are really far behind, but Minnesota's 9-2. The Green Bay Packers are 8-3, and they're in 3rd place. Of course, the Detroit Lions 10-1, and they're currently running away with the NFC, but that's a really close division. So the Detroit Lions have to take every game seriously. I think they will win today, and I think they should win pretty big, just because I think the Chicago Bears are a disaster. But I also want to point out the Detroit Lions don't have a good history on Thanksgiving, and that even dates back to last year when they broke through and had a great season. They still lost on Thanksgiving to the Green Bay Packers, a divisional game. They did not show up until late in that game, so it's possible they could drop a thud at some point. And against the Chicago Bears, it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're too well coached. I think they're on a mission. I think Dan Campbell's a man on a mission. I think that roster is feisty. I think Jared Goff wants to prove that he is probably an MVP candidate in this league. He had 1 5-interception game, but outside of that, he's been so careful with the football. Only 4 interceptions other than that, and they were all at the beginning of the season. Since they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Philadelphia Eagles have this as well. When both of those teams have lost to the Bucs, they've won every game since. So, yeah, the Detroit Lions have a lot of pressure on them, I think more than a lot of people think, just because they have to keep up with Minnesota and Green Bay in that division. Because, God forbid, you lose to one of those two teams down the stretch here, or even Chicago, and that could really hurt your chances in winning the division. So the Detroit Lions, they're riding a high wave right now, and they got to keep it up. I'm sold on them. I think they're a great football team. I think all should be fine with them today. But I wouldn't be surprised if they drop a thud at some point, because at the end of the day, it's the NFL, and that happens. You're going to have games that end up being thuds. You see it all the time. A really good team drops a game they probably shouldn't have, like the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Cleveland Browns last Thursday. Okay, hard to believe that game was already a week ago, but yeah, it happens. So you have to prepare for that. The Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. I want to say the Cowboys probably win this game because the Giants are just a mess. They should. They're at home. I don't think they've won a home game yet, if I call correctly, but they did beat the Washington Commanders, who I still think are a pretty decent team. But the Commanders have kind of come down to earth in recent weeks. They still have a lot of culture to change, and I think that's kind of to be expected because it's really hard to break through and change culture. So having said that, I think the Dallas Cowboys should win today just because the New York Giants are also a mess. But the Cowboys as a whole are a wreck, and they're not really going anywhere. So reports also saying Jerry Jones is not ruling out an extension of Mike McCarthy. I personally think Mike McCarthy has to go at this point. I did say early on in the season he shouldn't be on the hot seat because they've been in the playoffs every year. You have to keep going to the playoffs in order to win playoff games. And I'm just not in the mentality that you should have NFC championship or bust kind of seasons in a mentality like that, especially if you're making the playoffs every year. But it's clear to me the Dallas Cowboys are not going to make the playoffs this year, and they're on a downward trajectory. So I think Mike McCarthy is responsible for that, and they're going to have to try to get some young blood in that organization, I think, at the head coaching standpoint, because Mike McCarthy is kind of just archaic and only does really what's always worked. But he is a Super Bowl winning coach. I'm not going to take that away from him, especially during his time with the Green Bay Packers. So yeah, that is definitely something to look at. I think that game is very, very boring, to be honest with you. I'm much more excited to see the Detroit Lions this afternoon and the Chicago Bears. The Bears I don't like just because I don't like what they've done as an organization, but I like to see like what they could do, if that makes sense. The Giants, for me, we already know what they are. They're a mess, and the Cowboys are an overhyped mess. So there's nothing really in that afternoon slate. It's football, sure, but I'm not excited about that. It's two bad teams. Now, tonight's game between the Packers and Dolphins, I'm really excited about. As you know, I'm a part-time Dolphins fan as well, so I got the Dolphins hat going on right now. But for me, I really think that the Dolphins could win this game. It is in cold weather. I know Tua doesn't have great history there. Green Bay Packers probably should be the favorites, but I think the Dolphins have kind of gotten rolling as of late since Tua got back. I think overall their roster is stacked. They have great weapons. They have a great head coach. I think Mike McDaniel is one of the best in the NFL, to be quite honest with you, because he doesn't let the ship sink, especially because the Dolphins are clearly not as good as the Buffalo Bills, and they just don't sink. And I think they're a very resilient team, and I think overall, organizationally, they have a lot of work to do. Clearly, they do. They haven't won a playoff game since 2000, the longest drought in the NFL right now. So the Dolphins are clearly a little bit of ways away, I think, in terms of that. But I think they could break through and have a nice end of the season. I think it's possible. The Dolphins, on paper, have a really good roster. So I'm actually excited to see those offenses take off tonight because I'm not really sold on Green Bay's defense. They kind of let the Detroit Lions have their way with them a few weeks ago, and that was in Detroit in an outside stadium. The NFL's hectic. I mean, the New Orleans Saints a few years ago, a dome team, came to Cleveland in freezing temperatures and found a way to beat the Browns. So anything's possible in the NFL, and I think that could be the case this week. I like the Dolphins' chances, but I don't think I could pick them to win the game. Green Bay has been so sturdy, and they've kind of been a quiet 8-3. You don't hear too much about them. They're a pretty good football team overall. Obviously, with Jordan Love's contract, that's been a talk of the league over the last few months, but Green Bay's just not Detroit. They're not as good as Detroit right now because the Lions are essentially ascending all that. So, but they have to play Detroit in a few weeks in Detroit, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Green Bay Packers go and win that game. I think the Packers culturally are really good, and they're clearly on track to have a really good season. So I'd like to see what the Green Bay Packers continue to do. But for me, I'm rooting for the Dolphins tonight. I hope they pull it out. It should be a really good game. That actually, out of the three games, is the most exciting to me in terms of being a really good football game because there's a chance the Detroit game is a blowout. If Chicago upsets Detroit, I'd be stunned, but at the same time, I think the Lions are in prime position to absolutely annihilate the Bears. And the Giants and the Cowboys is a snooze fest. This night game between the Packers and Dolphins looks pretty exciting to me because honestly, both of these teams, the Packers are probably going to be in the playoffs anyway, but both of those teams are really in prime position to make the postseason, and their seasons are kind of on the line with a game like that. Going into the rest of the week, obviously the Browns play on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos on Monday. Bo Nix looks like a Rookie of the Year candidate right now. He's sure playing like it, and that's another team, as I mentioned, we're really quiet about right now. Denver's 7-5, and they're not really getting much attention for it. So to me, the Browns could stun them a little bit if they end up winning the game. I think Jameis is still fun, but I just look at the history of playing in Denver for Cleveland, and it's not very good. We've won once in Denver since 1990. And that was Baker Mayfield's rookie season, and it was by a point. It was by a point. It was thanks to a sack from, I believe it was Jabril Peppers, sacked Case Keenum in that game, and that's what ended it. It was 17-16 back in 2018. So, yeah, there's not a happy history of playing in Denver if you're the Cleveland Browns. Some of the other big games this week, I think Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, AFC North football right there. Cincinnati is going to put on an offensive show, but to me, the Pittsburgh Steelers culturally are in a much better place right now. But overall, I think I like Cincinnati in that game just because I think their offense is going to be really hard to stop. And if you looked at how the Pittsburgh Steelers defense essentially didn't show up in that Cleveland Browns game, a much more inferior opponent than the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion, the Steelers have some significant vulnerabilities. So I actually think the Steelers are possibly in a trap game with Cincinnati because the Bengals essentially need to win out at this point too, just like the Cleveland Browns do, but I'm not even putting the Cleveland Browns in the playoff conversation. That's a long shot at this point. I just think it's about, can Jameis be our quarterback next year? That's really what the Browns season's going to come down to. But having said that, in terms of the Bengals, I think at this point, if Zach Taylor isn't coaching for his job, he should be. I think all the pressure should be on him and the Cincinnati Bengals defense because that's the two biggest problems right now with Cincinnati. I've seen some people talk online about how Joe Burrow's the next Matthew Stafford because he's playing on a bad team. I don't want to say that. Matthew Stafford right now is showing to be the same Matthew Stafford he was in Detroit. Great quarterback, not a great team with the Rams right now. But having said that, in terms of Joe Burrow, he's already been to a Super Bowl. I get Matthew Stafford's won one, but Matthew Stafford had so many one-and-dones in the postseason compared to that. The only year Matthew Stafford won a playoff game, and he won multiple playoff games that year, was the Super Bowl run with the Rams. So far, Joe Burrow has been to 2 AFC championship games. Matthew Stafford's only been to 1 NFC championship game, so I actually hate that comparison. Having said that, though, Cincinnati, they should be a lot better than what they are. They should be contending with the Kansas City Chiefs because we know Joe Burrow used to drill them. He owned the Chiefs in their first 3 meetings. Obviously, with how great Patrick Mahomes is, it's kind of come down to earth a little bit. But yeah, that's the big thing if you're the Cincinnati Bengals right now. You look at the Harbaugh from the other day, too. I know Baltimore and the LA Chargers look like wild card teams right now. I would still say the Ravens on paper, because of that sweep over the Bengals, should end up winning the AFC North. I think Pittsburgh, I'm so struggling with that one because I think Pittsburgh might get into a little bit of a slump right now. They've kind of been exposed by the Cleveland Browns. So it wouldn't surprise me if Baltimore kind of overtakes that. But to me, the Ravens are still very, very vulnerable. I don't trust their defense, but hell, they have one of the best running games in the NFL with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson's throwing the football really well, too. Underrated passer, Lamar Jackson can play in the pocket. He's doing a terrific job of that, and he's so mobile and good. Other than that it really helps the Baltimore Ravens out. But to me, it's just who could beat the Kansas City Chiefs at this point? Can anybody? Can somebody do it? Honestly? Who in the AFC do you trust to do it? Only Cincinnati, I would say I would. Historically, though, because Cincinnati is not really that good on paper right now. Historically, I would trust Cincinnati. Buffalo hasn't done it in the postseason. Cincinnati's the only one that has. And maybe in the NFC, I'd say Detroit. Maybe Philadelphia. I don't know. It's a tough trajectory right now, but a lot of big games going into this weekend. The playoff race is thickening. And look at that NFC West. The Seattle Seahawks actually look like the best team in that division right now, and I'm not even kidding. The 49ers are kind of a mess. The Cardinals are on the rise. I thought they would be. I thought the Cardinals would be a pretty average team, but I don't think the Cardinals are going to be any sort of threat. And you look at the Rams, they've been kind of a mess. That division's going to be really weird because right now Seattle actually kind of looks like they're on the most straight and narrow. Same thing with the NFC South. You look at Atlanta's leading it right now, but I trust Tampa Bay more despite the fact Atlanta already swept the Buccaneers. I like Tampa Bay's roster and their energy and their offense a lot more. They're just a lot more fun. And I get they destroyed the Giants this week. But hey, they're the only team in the NFC right now that's beaten Philadelphia and Detroit. And since Tampa Bay beat those two teams, neither one of those other two teams have lost since. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are fun, and it's fun to watch Baker Mayfield turn his career around. And I really enjoy watching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play football. So a lot could happen. There's still a lot of football left to be played. That's the big thing. So many things can happen. I think the Miami Dolphins, for example, could be on the cusp of a playoff berth if they're able to overtake the Denver Broncos. But I still think the Broncos could probably go and be a wild card team. And if Denver gets a favorable playoff matchup, let's say they play Pittsburgh in round one, I would probably take the Broncos to win a playoff game this year. And I even said, like, the Broncos are probably the new New York Jets because they haven't gone anywhere in years. They're in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. But so far, Sean Payton, I mean, I underestimated how good of a head coach Sean Payton is. And I think the favorite for Coach of the Year right now should be Kevin O'Connell, in all honesty, because who thought Sam Darnold was going to uplift the Minnesota Vikings the way he has, especially with the offensive weapons they have? Kevin O'Connell has proven to be a phenomenal head coach, and the Minnesota Vikings are going to be in the playoffs. So that to me is the head coach of the year candidate right now, but I like Sean Payton in that conversation too, because the Denver Broncos looked like they were on a path to nowhere for a very, very long time. And still maybe, I think when you're playing a division with Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be really tough to overcome that. But having said that, though, Sean Payton is going to prove to be a force to be reckoned with. So, Denver is in a really good position. The LA Chargers even, too. I want to give Jim Harbaugh some credit, even though they lost to the Ravens the other day. The Chargers are a really good team. They really are. I love Justin Herbert. I love their defense right now. The Chargers, to me, I wouldn't want to see them in a first-round playoff series, unless I'm Kansas City or Buffalo. If I'm Baltimore, I don't want anything to do with the Chargers again, despite the fact they beat them. If I'm Pittsburgh, same thing. If I'm Houston losing to Tennessee, by the way, last week, there's some collapse worries there. I'm not so sure I'm bought into the Houston Texans like I was earlier on this year. I did pick Jacksonville to win that division. Obviously, that's going to be wrong now. But the Colts kind of still competing in that division. You look at Tennessee just winning a game in spite with the Houston Texans. So to me, the Texans have to be cautiously optimistic. They look like an 8-9, 9-8 football team. And I think C.J. Stroud might slip a little bit the way things are looking right now. But they still have to play the Chiefs, too, and that's another big thing. And that's the same thing a lot. Like, the Steelers still have to play the Chiefs. The Browns have to play the Chiefs, even though I think the Browns season's over to begin with. So a lot could happen in the NFL right now. It's getting crazy, and Thanksgiving is the best time to do it. So enjoy the games today. Enjoy the hell of trying to enjoy the Cowboys-Giants game, because that game looks absolutely putrid on paper. But I think you're going to have a really good 1 o'clock game, and I think you're going to have a great night game. All right, we're moving on to the game real quick. So the game is this weekend. Ohio State, Michigan. Everything's on the line for really more so Ohio State than Michigan. I don't think Sharon Moore is under any pressure at all to win this game. And that's because Michigan's just so bad this year compared to where they have been the last 3 years. But at the end of the day, Michigan is kind of in Ohio State's head, in my opinion. And it should be, for good purposes. And Ohio State fans should feel the confidence that they're going to go and beat Michigan at home on Saturday. But I want to point this out. At the end of the day, Michigan has had control of this rivalry the last 3 years. Michigan took control in 2021 and have won back-to-back-to-back. The first 2 games were not even close. Somewhat close, a 2-possession game the first time around, but not really. And last year was a lot closer, 30-24. Having said that, this Ohio State team is so talented, it's so good, and we honestly blame coaching for the one loss to Oregon. And we think Oregon's a really well-coached team, too, with a lot of talented players. Oregon should be the national title favorites right now. It's clear as day, and I don't think anyone's going to argue that. Having said that, this game tomorrow, well, it's Saturday, this game Saturday is going to be huge. It's going to be huge because if Ohio State loses and Michigan ruins your season, Ryan Day is going to go and this whole program is going to restart. And you're going to need to get an Ohio-born and bled guy, in my opinion, to really turn this around and focus on that game because this game is everything. And Will Howard even said it best the other day. He essentially said it was do or die for the Buckeyes. It is. Ryan Day said on, I believe, one of his own podcasts that it was the toughest thing since his dad died to lose to Michigan. I mean, that's some pretty powerful stuff right there. You can't lose to Michigan. You cannot lose to Michigan. It can't happen. Especially because you are a top 5 contending team, possibly on the verge of a bye in the college football playoff. And you're going to collapse it all away because you lose to an unranked Michigan team. And Michigan has the possibility to get in your head and cause you to make mistakes because of their recent history. If I'm Ohio State, I'm feeling confident that, yes, we're the more talented team. But you cannot, if you're Ryan Day especially, you cannot let it get in your head. Michigan could put those demons in your head because of their recent history. And what makes me nervous is Michigan conquered Northwestern last week. Ohio State beat them 31-7, so it was pretty dominant. I get it. But that wasn't the 50-6 win Michigan had last week. Michigan showed last week that they're ready for Ohio State. They want to ruin your season. Michigan's not playing for anything. They're not even ranked this year. They're the defending national champion. What they want to do at this point to defend that status is still say, we own Ohio State. And in the rivalry, in the last 3 years, they have owned Ohio State. If you're Ohio State, you cannot lose this game. If you lose this game, if it's by even a point, Ryan Day, out of here. He's got to go. You got to go find an Ohio-bled guy. I'm not a huge Ryan Day fan. I've said it numerous times. I think he's just not a great head coach. I think he could be a great coordinator somewhere. He was a great coordinator for the Buckeyes under Urban Meyer. But I just don't see the college potential with him. I just don't. And it comes down to that Michigan game. I'm not so sure Ryan Day is a guy that's going to win a national title. This Ohio State team should be contending for that national title. I think talent-wise, they're more talented than Oregon, actually. Dan Lanning is just a much better coach than Ryan Day. That's really what I think about this whole mismatch of situation right now. Talent-wise, and you go and play Oregon next week, let's say, you go to the Big Ten Championship, that's going to be the battle, too, because Dan Lanning, I think, is just a better coach than Ryan Day. And Oregon's a little bit of a less talented roster, but they're so well coached and calm and composed, the Oregon Ducks, compared to the Ohio State Buckeyes. That Nebraska game was fluky. It scared the hell out of me. The Indiana game made me feel a little bit better last week. I thought Indiana was going to play a lot better, to be honest with you, but I get it. Indiana hasn't played anybody. But still, I think it's crucial, if you're the Ohio State Buckeyes, to just take it to Michigan. I want it to be a blowout. Obviously, everybody wants it to be a blowout, but at least in Ohio. If you're watching in Detroit, you probably don't. But having said that, though, if you're in Ann Arbor right now, I want you to go pay attention to the Lions and watch Ohio State just absolutely crush your team. Because Michigan's going nowhere this year. The national championship feeling for Michigan will be beating Ohio State. And for me, if Ohio State loses this game, I see no excitement about the college football playoff. You got to beat Michigan. End of story. And Will Howard said it best. He really did in his press conference. He said a lot of things about this rivalry since coming to Ohio State. He really put it on display in his press conference. It's do or die. You better beat Michigan. You better beat them hard, good, and tough. You have Quinshon Judkins running the football. You have Trevion Henderson running the football. Denzel Burke plays really good defense. I get McLaughlin went down at center. That was kind of a big piece. But you're still the Ohio State Buckeyes. Will Howard has been phenomenal all year. It's going to come down to this game. You better beat the brakes off of Michigan. And if you just barely beat them, that's fine. It's still a win. I'll be happy. But beating the brakes off them will make everyone feel better. And Ryan Day, you better do it. Because if you don't beat Michigan, unranked Michigan who's going nowhere, Michigan who has the ability to celebrate ruining your season on your turf at the Horseshoe, then you're out of here. You're out of Columbus. You gotta go. Ohio State, the pressure is on. Beat the brakes off of the Wolverines. Beat them good, beat them hard. I'm tired of seeing all those X's through the M. They own you right now. Beat them. Do it. Crush them. It's a big weekend for Ohio State. And if you could do that, Ohio State football is back, baby. Let's go, Buckeyes. Can't wait to see the game on Saturday. I'm already hyped for it. I kind of want to be a Buffalo Bill fan right now and break a table. That's how energetic I am about that game. This is your opportunity. Do it. I'm going to calm down now as we wrap up the show, but briefly about the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm sorry. The Atlanta Hawks, you just let the Atlanta Hawks beat the brakes out of you. That loss was worse than the Boston Celtics loss the other day. That was awful on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I get it. They're not going to go 82-0 or 81-1, but still. That was a horrible loss at home. It's an in-season tournament game on Friday. I've said how many times the in-season tournament's stupid. It's an afternoon game. Please, offensively, Kenny Atkinson, figure something out and take it to the Hawks. You let Trae Young get 22 rebounds, and he's essentially the Hawks' only really, really good player. And he wasn't even the top scorer last night. The Cleveland Cavaliers really owe me the first bad loss of the season. I think they're going to be fine and they'll rebound. It's the NBA. It's the regular season, obviously. But, we saw some flaws last night, and it's starting to be a little bit more on the defensive end. And now with J.B. Bickerstaff coaching in Detroit, are they going to take that defensive edge off significantly? You got to keep those defensive principles still a little bit more. But Evan Mobley was still pretty good last night. Donovan Mitchell had some moments. It's the NBA. Things happen. We'll talk a little bit more about the NBA later on. But as I said today, enjoy the football games. Have fun. Enjoy family. That's going to be it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'll be back this weekend for Short Takes with Andrew Hoty to give my thoughts on Ohio State and Michigan and so much more. Stick around for that on Saturday, and we'll be back with more Raw Takes next week. And I want to thank everyone who commented on the one short again. Make sure to leave more comments below or on the reels, and I'm going to try to shout them out as often as possible here on the show. Have a good one, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.